of options.
Well, I'm obviously a painter, and but I've always been interested in the kind of correlations between painting and music, and the fact that we share the same kind of vocabulary in a way. Saying about colours, tones, rhythm, pace, and all the sorts of things that are also talked about in music. And so I, for many years, well, actually, Father Peter is something I did very specifically about 10 years ago, actually, when I found some musical score. I didn't know what it was, but I wanted to disrupt it, make it, the feeling that you get when you hear beautiful music down the back of your neck, that kind of a shiver. And so I thought, what would happen if I, made a visual shiver with pins and see what that looked like. And then I really wanted to see or hear what that would then sound like, really sung back. I didn't even know what the music was or anything. And then because of this show, it finally gave me the impetus to find out actually what it would sound like, what this piece of disrupted text would sound like. I had no idea what it was. Someone said to me it could be Baroque. Someone said it's not Baroque, it's more ancient than that. So I went to Ealing Abbey, where there's a Gregorian chant society, and Father Peter Burns sang it in front of me, my piece of work, which literally gave me shivers down the back of my spine to actually hear what this piece that I'd made 10 years ago sounded like. And I think that then gave me the impetus to then get other things together for the show that also relate, whether or not they've got musical score in it or not, that's the only one that has it, but things that look like they could relate. There's structures, underlying structures in my work, which is like underlying structures within, music or any kind of compositions. And that's where I met Daniel.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we met, where did we meet?
I
in the park.
I met in the park.
in the park. I lived in northwest London, and there's a place called Gladstone Park that to me was just a dog walks park, and I'd walk through it to work every day. And near the sort of time that I was actually going to leave London, I found there was a cafe, and then within the cafe there was Sandra doing work as an artist in residence, which absolutely blew my mind. I was like, what? What's Sandra doing in this park? So, and then, I got the real privilege of, I don't know if it was these particular pieces, but you were working on your work, so it was about 5 or 6 years ago, and I just connected with Sandra and her work straight away. I thought, this is brilliant. And I said, I like music, what if I drop around a CD? And because Sandra said she likes to actually paint to music, so I thought, oh great. And so the next day I actually compiled a CD and dropped it around to Sandra. And then we became sort of online buddies after that, didn't we? And we'd always sort of comment on others' work, which eventually led to us collaborating on
So I will send you images by internet, say this is something I'm working on, and also for this show I also sent you some sounds of what I was listening to.
You did, yeah.
And also some sounds I was making whilst listening and working.
Yeah.
And so some of those are kind of cross-pollinated. There seems to be a word we're talking about a lot today, cross-pollination. So that could
no, it's great. Yes, I understand real nice sort of almost like field recordings of herself actually creating the art, and I was just adamant that they're going to be incorporated in the pieces that I did. So that was just lovely to actually have that genuine texture from you actually creating the work within the actual music. And for me, that some of it would be a starting point. You'd hear this sort of grinding or turning, because I didn't see what she was actually doing, so I was having to use my imagination of how Sandra was using it, and that would be my starting point, and I'd build this bed of sound on top of these recordings. So when you listen to these, if you just little you might hear these textures from Sandra in there.
Some of them is actually drilling through this painting. That you there was some drilling going on in that, so I'm not sure how that came into your music.
Because we always seem to be connected to that painting in a strange way, because my work departed from you. So I had to travel very far because Sandra's my next door neighbour, which is the perfect combination. And I've always loved Sandra's work because I felt that they were very poetical, you know, and we often used to talk about the processes and the relationship between art and writing, whether it's poetry or there's any writing, and the similarities. And so when Sandra asked me to sort of collaborate in the project, we ended up thinking, you know, I've never collaborated with an artist before, but it was you know, such a brilliant experience. We used to sit down and have these kind of conversations, and you know, there's a lot of themes in Sandra's work that reflect my own writing. So her work is about disruption and erosion and destruction, and sort of the interplay between absence and presence. And you know, the kind of themes that I try to or identify with in my writing. And so we'd have these conversations in the kitchen, and I would often just write down some of the things she'd say, and then reflect. I started to reflect on this painting, especially the title, which was called "This Could Be All Gone Tomorrow." And what would happen was then I would. I'm just going to quickly tell you about the process, and then you can sort of come in, and don't know whether it's similar to yours, but what would happen, I'd go off and I'd start almost writing up the kind of conversations we had, but also taking in, sort of just taking on the creative process of thinking about the world around us as well. And I'd come up with these texts, which I'll show you here. You know, I did many a draft, and then I'd give them to Sandra, almost like to read, and what she'd do is she'd start highlighting things, almost as if it was like a marked up essay, but it wasn't. So she'd start highlighting things and words that really meant things to her. And then I would then go back, and so we were like in dialogue, so we were sort of conversational in dialogue, but also I was responding to her notes, to my writing. And then I started to sort of play around with the text and think about how we read narrative. You know, and yeah, literally, whether we read, you know, horizontally or vertically, and so then I started to create these kind of, I used to call them text services, where I then gave them back to Sandra, and then and if you actually go into the toilet, you'll see them, and she would then disrupt them in her own way. And then we sort of collaborated from a visual perspective. We collaborated on these kind of text canvases or text surfaces, which are in the toilet, so that was the sort of visual aspect. But and then what I ended up doing was almost like a sort of a reflective piece. I ended up writing a poem as well, which features in actually the very new book that's just come out, actually, and the poem is in there. It's also actually in the toilet as well, so you can listen to it, so I'll spare you by not reading it. So there's, yeah, quite a few sort of different processes involved.
And I think that's what I really enjoy about this particular exhibition, which was originally shown in London, but it's morphed to this place. So I'm seeing it in a completely different way, and it's you know, just responding to the space in a different way. And there's pieces which weren't in the other show, which are now in this show, and you know, and the works are all kind of quite interrelated. And so collaborating with people, because being a painter is quite a solitary thing, you know, you're in your studio for hours upon end with nobody, just you and yourself and your work. And so when you collaborate with other like-minded people, they come from their own way, and it makes you rethink things.
Yeah,
and
I think it's very freeing, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Especially because I've just got two young girls, you might have seen them earlier. So my world has been sucked into being a dad, and then it's amazing, then I get sucked into being an artist again. And I was able to do that at home, and especially during COVID, we were still able to collaborate and do an exhibition online as well, which was amazing. But because you have these pieces and still be able to work on them digitally, so I have them like on the screen here, and I have my little setup, and just sit there and just absorb the piece, absorb the title, set my own kind of restrictions. We have the word disruption, so I was like, okay, what's my most disruptive gear that I've got? And it's an old tape machine, it's old synth, my old bass guitar, and just create on the fly, just almost like we are now, just with the picture in front of me, absorbing what I see, creating my own kind of story within it. And I do encourage you, we did the talk where I was able to play the music and then talk about the music whilst I just played it, but yeah, there's QR codes here, it is available online, Bandcamp and all the streaming sites, so if you can sit and view these personally, I would recommend that as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously after the talk, the video will be continuously going on a loop,
Yeah.
so you'll be able to see them and hear them at the same time. Obviously, whilst we're having a talk, it has to go in the background. But
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
there may be specific ones that you'd like to talk about, or maybe ones that.
Yeah, no,
that
totally.
But I mean,
about.
it's quite interesting because you picked This Could All Be Gone Tomorrow, and I didn't know that Daniel was going to sort of pick that one. So we all sort of worked in our own spaces, I guess, but we actually both responded to, I mean, I responded more so to the title. So it's like how we, how we engage with the work. So I responded to the title, and you obviously, there was a narrative there for you too, so you responded to that work.
Yeah.
And as a result, we sort of created our own This Could All Be Gone Tomorrows.
So shall I talk about This Could All Be Gone Tomorrow? It seems like it's the one I'm going to have to talk about then. So I mean, I was basically the basis of all my work is about movement. When I was doing my postgrad, you have to focus on what your particular theme or what your work hinges upon, what gives you the impetus for doing it, because really to sit in a studio or painting studio and around for hours is a bit weird. What is the thing that drives you? So the thing that really drives me is the whole idea of that things change, I suppose it's a psychological, emotional thing that, we all go through things, same in nature, we have spring, summer, autumn, winter, and it carries on again. Something that's bad will be good, something that's good that might change, and that it's inevitable. And so the whole thing about This Could All Be Gone Tomorrow is not a negative thing. It sounds like it could be negative, but actually it's positive. My decisions for this painting, piece of work, was that every decision I made one day, I'd make a different one the next day. So I made paint, so there's layers of collage underneath that then I painted over. It's like, okay, that's all gone now. And there's a sense of liberation in your own destruction, if you know what I mean. So basically you created something, then you disrupted it. But then you have to deal with that. How can I make it better? If you look at the paintings that are in the window, you're able to see the fronts and the backs, and they're all called things like This Could All Be Gone Tomorrow, broken and fixed. So I've broken something, but how many ways can I fix it? How many ways can I make it better? So I've filled the holes with wall plugs. They're practical things that are useful in the house. But they're also quite beautiful in their own way. They're colours, different colours mean different things at different gauges. So if you look at the painting from the front, you see a nice pink facade of beautiful colours, but actually on the back it's all destroyed, and there's notes maybe that said, destroy or fragile or something. So they're all words that can be used for emotions as well as descriptive words about practical and visual things. So a lot of my work can be seen from the back, but obviously for practical reasons you have to sometimes select which side you're going to show, and this is definitely the nicer side. But obviously there's holes which I've drilled through. Quite often I might have a system of how I'm going to start my disruptions. So this one here, there is a bit of a grid at the back, and the grid was there to help hold my separate elements together, so it had a practical reason for being there. But then that gave me a pattern in the back that I could drill through. So it was specific. It may look random, but it's quite specific. And elements which are left, you can see where I've painted over with gloss paints, whatever I had, I would use. So, you know, it could be gloss paints, it could be oil paints, it could be whatever I have around. Things which are used to fix, this is sandpaper that you stick on the floor, it's anti-slip stuff. I find it a wonderful medium. It takes charcoal so beautifully. So things that you wouldn't normally use in art, I think, were all in there. And it's so multi-layered that I think that's maybe where that comes in.
And also just the idea of you talking about the disruptions and the erasure. And again, that's a similar process to writing and your creativity. You're constantly erasing things and you're constantly reworking things. And I think that's how, you know, when I used to listen to Sandra talk about the work and her processes, I tried to sort of embed that into how we would, into how, you know, I could create, or how we could create pieces of work, and how language in a way was is constantly erased, and our conversations are constantly erased. And one of the, you know, and sort of one of the ideas that I had was a quote on that, in terms of, you know, when we talk, there's sentences always kind of hanging mid-air, as it were, and we, you know, and obviously we try to sort of capture them and then erase them, and we forget them, and they kind of come back again. And sometimes, you know, in our fixing, the way, you know, sometimes we say things we don't want to say. How do we repair that? So there was these kind of similar narratives going on, and there was a quote by Lynn Hedgenian, and she's an American contemporary avant-garde sort of experimental poet. Related to the language school in America in the sort of 1960s, 60s and 70s. And she had a quote that said, to some extent, each sentence has to be the whole story. And I really tried to kind of work on that premise. Again, coming back to the way we read a painting. You know, if we just looked at a corner of the painting, whether we'd read it very differently to the way we'd read it. If you're looking at the entirety of it, if we focused on a particular word, you know, in a text, you know, what kind of narratives just immediately jump out at us. And so, yes, I sort of worked on the idea of you know, just looking at these individual, you know, playing around with text and just looking at individual words and how they create these kind of narratives for us. And the other thing that we did was really exciting, was we left, which we've done this time around, so if you do visit the toilet, it's a very exciting space, I promise you. More exciting. We left these pieces of texts for the community, for people to actually respond to. So there's this ongoing narrative, and it's fascinating that. So obviously we welcome you to, you know, said graffiti, but you can write on these texts. There could be just, you know, just a guttural response to the words. But fundamentally, like these texts, like canvas, just takes on new life, because all these new narratives begin to form. So that was also like a really interesting collaborative process.
And Daniel's?
Yeah.
How do you, because I found it quite fascinating when we did a talk,
Yeah.
and you described how you came to certain sounds, you know, being faced with an image online, how you could then interpret that into sounds, and where you start.
Yeah, well, I restricted myself with a tape machine, with a tape loop, so it's only 15 seconds, so I just wanted to clear myself of the sort of computer stuff that I'm normally playing with, and just sit in front of the piece with the tape machine, grab what I've got around me, and just, it's more being intuitive, more playful, but with the end result to try and capture the mood that I was trying to get, and that was just, it was refreshing really, just having that kind of patience with it and sitting with it. And I absolutely felt I just so connected with the title and with this piece, and it was only, well, I did the score for this one probably about 2 years ago, and then we had the last exhibition, which was actually set after COVID, and I played back this piece, and it was just so wow, because for me it sounds like someone losing breath, and it almost represents these drill holes, but it was just it captured the mood so perfectly for me. This could all be gone tomorrow, and this sort of last breath, and just hearing it back, like a few months ago, it was just like, wow, that is the mood I was sort of trying to capture, and it was almost sort of reflected within society at the time as well.
And probably takes on new breath now as well.
It absolutely did. It was almost like a premonition of where I'm going in life. But yeah, so that was particularly that piece. And again, with most of the pieces I do, it was that concept of just sitting with it and almost having patience and play to just something to sit right with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're here, as you said, we couldn't really play them all at the same time whilst listening. It's a shame that we won't be able to hear it at the same time.
But if you do have any questions as well, just if you're thinking, oh, how do you know, that might help us to answer anything that you might.
As a group, have you ever collaborated with the artists and musicians to see what their interpretation would be, how different it might be?
Yeah. Well, if there were different groups of there would, I mean, it would be,
I've only just started.
Yeah,
so,
okay, yeah.
But that's a good idea. It has to be someone that relates to your work, though.
You get on.
well, actually, it would be quite interesting if someone did relate to you. It would make the relationship harder. In a way, I think we definitely keep thinking like it'd be nice to collaborate on something else.
There's always other ideas. I mean, we were just putting things up in the toilet, and it's like, next time we'll do this, that, and the other, and then obviously, we're always going, here's another painting. How do you feel about this one? I mean, I'm always surprised when I hear Daniel's descriptions of how because he doesn't know the scale of them either. Because when I'm sending them through, I mean, this could be huge, or it could be that size.
Yeah.
So Daniel created a piece for that one just in the corner. It's this big.
Yeah.
But I think when you were creating sounds for it, I think you thought it was really big.
I thought it was like a door.
The size of the door. Okay.
So, yeah. Which is that one is that Father Peter Burns
In the background.
I got the background. So Sandra sent me the recordings of Father Peter Burns, and I was adamant to use that within the piece. So same technique of just randomly taking snippets from his recording into the tape loops and creating a collage of his vocals. But then, due to the destructive look of the actual painting, it was then my job. I wanted to just destroy how he beautifully sung it. Because in my head, and again, I had to create my own kind of story, because what I didn't want to do is, the fact that we weren't working in a physical environment together, I didn't want to pick apart Sandra's mind on everything. I wanted to create my own interpretation of it. And for this piece for me was the size of the door, and it was a door. And the music that you can hear that I've created for it was seeping through these holes from the background of this sort of like cave-like atmosphere from behind. And then I visioned almost like these scratch marks as some sort of beast on the other side of the door, trying to get in and find this sort of Father Peter Burns sort of nicely singing down back in the back of the cave. But for me, it's just fun for me to create my own narrative, my own story, and pair it together with something that can be completely opposite to what Sandra's thinking, but it still creates.
But it doesn't ever feel like it's a complete world away.
No,
it wasn't. I think that's what
yeah.
felt quite surprisingly. So it was a lovely surprise to know that some of the narratives that we were coming out with, fundamentally, they were embodied in that work anyway, or they were embodied in how Sandra was thinking. So we were all almost, in some ways, singing from the song page, but in a slightly different way, or in a slightly different tone,
I think you're singing from a
in
completely different page. I was like so kind of like wow. but in a way, yes, because I didn't think, because you're obviously making a narrative of your own, because you're not seeing it, and obviously you never painted it, so you don't know what I'm thinking.
No.
You've created your own story, haven't you? So when I heard it back, I thought, well, of course. And I started to see it from your perspective. I thought, of course it could look like an old door. It has this kind of like these textures, which could be an old door. It has these holes with like an old door, almost like in the church when you're giving confession or something, and the priest is on the other side, or
Yeah.
you know, I suddenly felt from your perspective, and I started to re-look at my painting that way, and you know, that it has that effect where you can almost reinterpret your initial thing, you know.
Yeah.
and
Well, that was my block. It was like, when I started the project, it was like, what do I do here? I don't want to like try and think, oh, what's Sandra thinking? Am I trying to get the perfect match to what Sandra is trying to express in her painting? As I to actually go, no, I'm different. I'm me. Sandra's Sandra. I can be inspired by her work and create my own narrative from it, which I think we should all be doing, and just bounce off each other.
Which is what we do, basically, when we
And that's also a point which we just had this conversation earlier, strangely enough. We were standing in front of this painting, which is called Language for Movement and Sounds. And you interpreted it as being
almost like clinical, wasn't it? It was almost like the background was like a hospital clinical environment, and then it had been disrupted on top of that. And then I read it and saw that you sort of like a ballerina pirouette.
So you saw it as that, you saw it as a ballerina pirouetting.
Yeah.
And when I painted it, I was thinking of waterfalls. So how many different things do you get really out of one painting? But I'll just give you a brief description of as how it was created. Obviously waterfalls, movements, anything that has movement just grabs my attention. So it's like, how can I create the feeling and the sounds of a waterfall? I can't do that. I'm not going to try and paint the waterfall as it is. I'm an abstract painter, I wouldn't want to try and paint a waterfall. But how would it feel to be the waterfall? How in nature the stones, the rocks are there, but how can I create those rocks in my studio? So I quite often work with elements of chance. So behind this painting is a grid, and I roll my dice, and the dice will give me coordinates on the grid. You can see that on some paintings which you can see back to front. So the reason for rolling the dice to give me coordinates for the grid was to find places where my rocks would be. So these are my abstract areas of rocks where the movement of the water is going to bounce off, move in front of. And so that's where all these dots are. That's my syringing from the back. Sometimes it runs through, and that's just the way it is. There's the darkness in some areas, so then I interact with it on the front. So I've created my areas of rocks. How can I then show the different feelings of the different types of movements of the water? So some of it could be shafts of light, solid shafts of water, some more blurry, some little bits coming from the side, some kind of rustling, rippling sounds and movements coming from this side, that side. So it's also about trying to show what the sounds of the waterfall is like, as well as the visuals of it, which obviously it doesn't look like it, but that kind of sense of forward and backwards feeling of things being behind and in front as well. So quite often I will, pin something on a thought of something particular. So that's a waterfall. That one behind you there is surfaces among surfaces. So I was very interested about, is it Ralph Waldo Emerson quote about we're just surfaces, the best thing in life is to how well you skate upon them. And I really like that idea that we're all just these surfaces interacting. So I'm doing a whole body of work at the moment called 100,000 surfaces. I haven't reached quite 100,000, 100 maybe, but that one behind you there is surfaces among surfaces, and that one, I started this painting about 10 years ago, not with this intention, but it was another painting which I decided I didn't like, so I then started to drill through it and fill it and find as many ways of creating different surfaces which could sort of like be different but somehow still fit. The hardboard is cut open and slipped up, so you've got gaps, you've got things coming from behind and in front. And I think that's what a lot of my work is also about, things that you see, things you don't see, what's surface, what we choose to show, what we choose to hide.
It reminds me of a quote actually by an Asian American poet called Mimi Bursenluga, and she says, "My origins are a linguistic surface." So I just thought of that. Just like,
I suppose everything is surface, isn't it? You know, Facebook is surface, isn't it? Like, oh, I'm having a great time. Ooh. You know, there's a lot of that, you know, those correlations.
And then, I was just going to just end it on thinking, and then I thought, well, how do I just, not conclude, I don't think this will ever be finished, but how do I have the one main response to Sandra's work? So we're doing these text surfaces, and we're doing, and I did this series of lots of writing, and then, and it's this idea of production, of having to produce, and what could I, how do I write in the same as how do you produce the music, how do I, and then I did end up doing a poem called This Could All Be, which is in the toilet, and which is also in this book, and they are once again these kind of sentences that we've captured, and hopefully they'll make more sense to you now. Once you sort of
and if you've got any questions now,
yes.
Did it always start with you as the as the painter, and then go to yourself, or have you tried maybe starting with a piece of your music and then maybe your interpretation? Because each, from what I'm gathering from what you've done, is that each piece is a blank canvas, because what you see in that is different to what you see to what I see. So it is a blank canvas, but your poetry could be a blank canvas to yourself and to yourself.
As of yet, it's that way, isn't it? And every time I hear them both talk and see the work in person, I really want to start your dice idea. I really want to get into the detail, the gritty detail of how Sandra creates these pieces with the almost a set of rules, isn't it? Because I don't do that. I'm sort of intuitive, using more like a heart-to-heart feeling. Does it feel right? Whereas I don't use rules in that sense. I used to rule with a set of instruments I use, but it would be amazing almost to mirror Sandra's concept in that way. And I think moving forward, I would really like to do that.
But it did start with Sandra, I think. I think Sandra was the core element of this collaboration, because we all kind of responded. But you're right, actually it could be a very different response if we listen to your music first and then we work from that.
Or even in the same room, we'll be in the same room together.
God, that's the big one.
Did you have like, when you did that, did you have a title in mind in your head, and did you share that title to these two? Or did you just say, this is the image, what do you think?
And I gave him the title.
Well, actually,
that's going to again.
Well, actually, I don't think you did give us a title. Did you give this? Did you give us a title? Oh, so what's the title?
I realised at the time, talking about everything should be contained in one sentence.
Yeah, each sentence should have a narrative.
I feel like my titles are
a
whole little poem in one.
Yeah.
So this could all be gone tomorrow, or language movement and sounds, or shadows rise like fireworks. It's almost, for me, it feels like the start of a poem that I never wrote. I suppose it continued as a painting.
Does the title come first? Does the title always come first, or is it a response to what you make?
That's interesting.
Half and half. Sometimes the title will not come to me and I get really angry and trying to find something meaningful, but quite often, I'd say about, maybe 60-40 title first. There's definitely that I work towards what that is, that I'm, services among services.
So do you have a vision of how you come up with the title, and then do you have a vision of how that piece will look, or is it you have the title and then it unfolds kind of organically?
What it looks like. No, I mean, shadows rise like fireworks. The premise for that was that they don't all have the same structure, as in I don't always roll dice. I've let that go a bit now. But there might be some kind of thing that I might just say that this was all about movement from right to left, and so I measured down both sides of the canvas the same measuring. So it's like, how can I move from right to left while listening to Philip Glass. So that was my thing, you know. So I'd have Philip Glass on, and it was a ritual. I had all my oil sticks set up on my oil bar sticks. You know, you get oil
Yeah.
into my bars, and I attached them all to long sticks of what are they? Those tall
Bamboo.
So I had them all laid down as like a ritual. So I'd like have my Philip Glass on, and then when it started, I'd run to my canvas, and it was how I moved from right to left with that particular oil bar. So that was a much more physical reaction. So as it hit the struts, you'll be able to see there's a rhythm that picks up each time it hits a structure, and so that creates its own rhythm. My body, the music, and my gesture with the canvas created that. Then I did that for the top as well, but then with the top I had less strength because I didn't have my whole body strength that I would have down, so it was higher. So they were a bit lighter and they bounced differently. So then I was left with a gap in between, and was like, you know, what should I do with this gap? You know, and I had this feeling that I wanted to shift from light to dark. But how? So I then painted all these different shades of greys, and rather than doing left to right, I decided to whoosh them up through. So like the shadow being a positive thing rather than a dark shadow creeping across. It's actually a firework or tone. And the sounds that it made when I whooshed up and did this kind of gesture, it just sounded like a sparkler, not sparkler, like a rocket disappearing, you know, like that. So then the title of that one came later. You know, shadows rise like fireworks. It felt as actually descriptive of exactly what I was thinking of.
Which is interesting, because that's how sometimes the writing process also, you know, I always find my titles after I've written the work rather than, and so this is unusual. That,
Do you like
yeah,
that?
I quite remember, yeah.
Yeah, and I just, they're very similar to your titles. Yeah, they're almost like a little No, I completely mirrored what Sandra had done there, just with the sound. I straight away, well, with the title it helped as well, but looking at it, it was shadows rise like fireworks. I was like, how am I going to create 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 firework noises, but one as loud as I can, and then one really quiet, and it was just, that was my fun, just to see if I could do that. And yeah, watch your speakers or your ears when you listen to this one, because it is explosive throughout. And it was great. The size of it really is, because again, I didn't know how big that was. And seeing it, I was like, yes. I'm going to dig on that one. It's big.
But sorry to then just pick up on that again, bringing the vocabulary with music and art. You know, you were talking about tone when you were describing it, sort of, because there's however 7 different tones of grey, from the dark to the light to the dark. So you were talking about also, you know, how there was a muffledness tone to a sharper tone.
That's right. Yeah, I just wanted to start off muffled and almost just become unbearable, really, with the last sound. And using the tape machine, that was me. That's tape running around. So I just recorded the tape machine, so you would just hear the sound of the cogs going around, which almost was my representation of the lines. So it was nice actually to have something visual that I almost felt like had matched sonically.
When you like come together and work, for example, you look at a piece that you're working on or finished, and you get each of your different interpretations of it. Have you ever come across a time where you can't relate to someone else's interpretation of it, or do you always manage to find something and like, you're like, oh yeah, actually now I can see it differently?
I think I found it I found one quite difficult. That one there that's in the corner, which is called Analysis of Rising and Falling. And it's quite a light, floaty thing. And when I heard it, it's really plompy, kind of boom, boom, boom sound. And I was like, it's not what I expected. But then when you described why you did that, I thought I understood.
For some people, I was thinking of what would it be like to actually stand in front of this piece and hear because almost I was creating a soundscape to almost enhance yourself within the world, so you can actually immerse yourself and look at the picture. And I did a piece initially of 2 notes going very, very fast, because it looks like they're just sort of speeding down into this sort of darkness. And for me it felt too intense to hear this and look at the painting at the same time. And so what I did is I slowed it really, really slow, and it just became the opposite. But I felt as a soundscape, it allowed you to see the busyness of the picture that sort of holds you in a more solid environment with the sound. It was quite dark as well, because there is a nice big dark patch in there, which almost felt like all these sort of little light, they could be life or little alien something just flying down and then just getting destroyed in the darkness below. So that's where I sort of ended up with that piece. But yeah, that was, for me, it was a tricky one to create, but I kind of settled with where I got.
And I was happy with that description afterwards, but in the beginning I was like, it's not what I imagined this one to sound like at all. It's really light, and he's made it really dark, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, but I think that is the creative process, and that is art, and that's writing. It's like, you know, when you write something, you know, you set it out into the world, and you know, potentially whatever it is that one might have written, everybody will have a slight different interpretation of it and a slight different narrative and relationship to it. And so you've almost like got to kind of let it go and kind of enjoy those new narratives that the work invites, really. But I think, yeah, if we all open ourselves up enough, you know, there's always an interpretation, and you'll always find your own narratives. Yeah.
We'll wrap it up there. So, yeah, we're around if you want to ask me any personal questions. I don't mean that. I mean, if you'd like to just talk about any particular pieces, you know, when you're moving around or,
Yeah, we're around.
Thank you very much.